Greetings and welcome everyone. This is the second in our series of business conversations. This is a series where I bring some of the leading lights in the professional services industry to share their thoughts on some industry matters with you. And today I'm delighted to be joined with someone I've had the privilege of working with and known for many years now, Nick Gordge, who's the head of clients and markets at WSP in the buildings and property space. It's going to be a really exciting conversation. We're talking about things engineering, but also really around clients and all things about winning work and business development. It's absolutely my cup of tea and what we're here to do in the BD ladder. So before I go any further, I just thought I'd throw it over to Nick, just tell us a little bit about your career and what brought you to get to the role you're currently in.
Thanks, Ben. It's good to be here. So I became a consulting engineer back in 1989, and after working in the light industry for a while. And that was really the start of my professional career as an engineer. And in that time, I worked on some wonderful projects that made real differences to communities. And I've worked in Hong Kong, I've worked in Brunei, UK and New Zealand. So been around a bit, worked on a vast range of projects, which has been really exciting.
So Nick, it's been quite a few years for all of us. And there's been a number of economic and working challenges that have affected the engineering sector. What impacts have they had on you, and what have you seen in the market?
Yeah, so economically there's been ups and downs with recessions and government funding being withheld or made available. So some of the challenges have been around tracking that. I think for the construction sector overall there's been some significant challenges. It's one of the few industries globally that has had zero improvement in productivity in the last 20 years for various reasons. And if you think about many other industries, they manufacture things, whereas in construction we build things from raw components. So there's a real opportunity for construction to look at how we might shift from multiple trades turning up on site into designing for manufacture and assembly, and that would improve productivity. So because productivity has been reasonably stagnant, and we've seen increasing costs and escalations around the globe due to increasing costs around resources and materials, what that means is that lots of clients have got a finite pot of money to spend, and they're getting less for their money than they used to, and it has a significant impact on the construction sector, but consulting engineers as well. So we have to be very mindful of giving value for money to clients and helping them understand where that value is.
Absolutely, and the other thing that kind of springs to mind is obviously you work in teams on big projects, and that's been hard to have that collaborative working environment that fosters new ideas and brings teams together. How challenging and how you resolve that? Yeah,
that's huge, because projects have become more complex. And we talk about a VUCA environment, which is volatile, uncertain, complex and ambiguous. And as projects have become more complex, so the desire to get some systems in place to address that complexity comes in, which only adds more layers of complexity. So we're taking a bunch of knowledge workers, consulting engineers and architects, and trying to then constrain their thinking through a systematized process.
Yeah.
When actually what's needed is to unshackle these folks and allow them to collaborate and innovate to achieve the outcomes that folks are looking for. And that can be really challenging. And as I say, projects are more complex, so the numbers of people involved in those projects now is growing. And if those professionals come from different organisations, so you have the complexity of trying to manage that process, the design process, but also integrate all of the thinking. And it can be extremely challenging. So consulting has got a real focus on technical excellence, but we also need to understand how people operate within those contributing organisations as designers, but also within client organisations as becoming complex as well.
Absolutely, because you've got to bring the client on the journey as well.
Correct, yeah. And the client sets the standard quite often in terms of engagement and behaviours for the team. And so for the composite design team, and so it's really important that they understand their role is not just necessarily cost, quality and time. It's about behaviours and outcomes.
Fantastic. Awesome. So we were touching upon technology and a lot of changes going on in the engineering sector and how that's affecting. So sort of speaking more broadly, getting to that lovely bigger picture. In the future, what are the kind of next 2, 3 or major challenges that are going to be facing the engineering sector and how they're going to cope with that?
So there's a lot of challenges that are coming up, some are nearer term than others. Clearly we need to be thinking about revolutionising the construction sector overall in order to get those productivity gains that we're looking for to compensate for the rising prices in materials. But more closer to home, I guess, is around the smaller firms that are being acquired by large firms. We see a consolidation within the sector, which leads to a bit of commoditisation, which means if we're large firm against large firm competing for major infrastructure projects, then it becomes increasingly difficult for clients to select which firm, and so they fall back on selecting on price. So we not only have to find ways to improve the value that we add to our clients, but we also need to add something extra, which may be around the experience that we provide to clients. And right now, the challenge is around retention. There are insufficient numbers of architects and engineers in New Zealand to deliver on the large infrastructure projects and the smaller infrastructure projects as well that the country has. So recruitment is huge, retention is huge, and as a result we need to really keep a focus on quality and timeliness of delivery.
So that recruitment, barriers are now starting to kind of open up a little bit. Are we starting to see people wanting to come to New Zealand, or is there competing markets which are drawing the attention of those highly skilled engineers?
Look, I think there's competing markets. What I'm seeing right now is a trickle of people coming into the country, but an exodus of people leaving. So New Zealand's been in its COVID environment for probably longer than Europe, and so lots of folks have felt that they want to do their OE. Now that the gates are open, people are leaving, and so we see real pressures on some of those levels of people at that age in their late 20s, early 30s that are really solid operators who are going to move overseas looking for those experiences. So I'm not sure that will resolve itself anytime soon.
So the staggered OE, as we call it over here, the overseas experience that we get in New Zealand and actually in Australia, we have a lot of audience over there as well. That's starting to have an impact on what you're doing in consulting and across construction, I'm guessing.
Absolutely. I think certainly within construction, I think there might be a little bit easier to attract some workers from countries who perhaps don't have quite such a good economic environment as ours, but when it comes to professionals in the consulting side, I think we're seeing it tend to be more one way.
Interesting. So Nick, we've been talking more broadly about the sector, but now we're going to get into the stuff that's my passion. Obviously that's the reason why I founded the BD Ladder. And you know, business development and engineers and sectors is massively important for consulting engineers to engage with their clients and win new work. So for all those engineers out there, whatever stage of their career, what is the time they should start thinking about business development and building those client relationships?
It's a really interesting topic because it's something close to my heart as well. I think winning work is the lifeblood of any consultancy, regardless of discipline. So as engineers and architects, we need to be engaging with the market in order to keep the flow of work coming through. We do projects, and projects have a life cycle. So once we've completed a project, we need other projects to work on, and we have many that we work on concurrently, of course.
Yeah.
So there's a whole pipeline of projects that come through and work. So in order to win work, we need to be engaged with our clients, and many consultants talk about being a trusted advisor. In order to become a trusted advisor, I believe you have to become a trusted deliverer, which means that you need to be able to deliver the projects you've got in order to get the attention of clients so they take your advice. So at what point in somebody's career should they start to think about that? Well, quite rightly, in the first year or so out of university, our graduates need to be focusing on translating their education into practical knowledge and skills that they can use to deliver projects for clients. But they also need to be mindful of the experience that they deliver to clients as they send a report out the door, or when they go to a client meeting. What experience does the client get? So they really need to be cognizant of that at a very early stage. By being aware of those things, they not only build an organisation's brand, but they build their own personal brand. And if we use the phrase seller doer, and clients will come to somebody because they trust them to do the job. And so as they're engaging with that individual, that person ends up being the seller as well as delivering afterwards. So if they don't understand that whole concept and the mechanisms and the skills required to sell, I don't like selling, but that whole concept, then they will just get left behind in terms of being a well-rounded consultant, and they'll be potentially technically excellent, but without the reputation that will secure their own future.
But absolutely, and if you think about it, at those stages in the career, they're interacting with people who are their peer group, and as they go up the level, their peer group will go up the level. So should they be kind of making sure they stay in touch with those they're working with now and those they left university with? And
I think they should. I think connections are really important, but I think they should also be thinking about personal brand. So it's not just about being connected to somebody, it's about the quality of that connection and relationship, and do they do the right things to engender trust and depth in relationships so that it's a lifelong relationship.
Absolutely. So Nick, fun for me and hopefully fun for you. I'm going to focus back in on you and your career now. So how important has developing relationships and building those trusted client relationships over the years been for your career?
It's been extremely important. There's a saying in sport that you're only as good as your last game, which is it applies to what we do as well. So it's really important that you keep that in mind as you build your relationships. And I think as people work with you, they understand you more, and that relationship deepens, and then they will come back to work with you again if they enjoy working with you. What I've found in the UK, it was really important to have those relationships, but in New Zealand it's multiple times more important. New Zealand is a very, very relationship-based country, economy, and having worked in various countries as well, and I do quite a bit in Australia, the Australians envy the level of relationship that we have in New Zealand with our clients. And they wish they could have the same, but of course it's a two-way street. So if the clients don't want that level of relationship, so be it. But understanding how important it is to the lifeblood of an organisation, but also to your own personal brand and personal reputation, it suggests to me that those relationships are essential to being successful in business.
Absolutely they are. And there's one thing that kind of intrigues me and puzzles me. So we've both been in business for quite a number of years now. I don't want to embarrass either one of us with how long it's been. And we talked about, you talked about, how important it is to do good work and clients come back, and it's absolutely massively part of it. But not all projects go well, and not every time the client's expectations or whatever perceived expectations are met. So when you're having those difficult conversations, what are your kind of top tips or go-tos to try and get through that situation?
Well, I think the very first thing is not to be defensive, which is very difficult. It's easy to say, difficult to do. I think it's really important to listen. Clients will share with you their concerns. It's important to listen and consider them, and then work out a way to address the issues. Quite often, organisations will come up with a solution and implement it or present it. My preference would be to have a few ideas and talk to the client about those ideas and ask if they've got any other ideas, and collaboratively work out a solution. Because they are tough conversations. Every project has some difficulties at some point. One thing to bear in mind, of course, is that nobody comes to work to do a bad job. They will come to work to do a good job and to contribute to a project and to society at large. So if there's some hiccups along the way, I've never seen in my career that's down to bad actions.
No.
So therefore, if everybody's got good intent, let's just find out where the overlapping good intent is and plot a course from there.
So it sounds to me like it's more about an open dialogue, hearing what it is, and then almost like a realignment and getting back on the journey and course together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it can go a little bit further as well in terms of really trying to understand not just the project, but the client organisation.
Yeah.
And not just the client organisation, but the individuals within that organisation and how they fit in and what their roles are and their hopes and fears. And so we all talk about being the trusted advisor and the consultant of choice and all the usual hackneyed phrases. But in order to achieve that, you've really got to understand the organisation. You've then got to understand the drivers of the individuals and be able to offer additional value. And you can do that through numbers of ways, but mainly it's around talking and understanding, and then offering some insights and different ideas that will help those individuals. And maybe I'll give you an example from 20 odd years ago in the UK, working as a consultant but engaged by a major developer, property developer. The property developer had some issues around some costings, and so as an organisation we down tools on everything else and focused on that one client for one day to come up with some solutions. This was within a team of about 15 people, come up with some solutions that we could present the next day, so that particular development manager, when he had his meeting on the Monday with the chief exec, he had lots of information. So we didn't wait to be asked, we just produced that. And as a result, we became a consultant of choice. And it wasn't me, it was the team. Yep. And what happened after I left the UK, that firm was still the consultant of choice for that particular developer. So we offered lots of insights, lots of ideas, presented when possible, and worked collaboratively to achieve the client's objectives, not our own.
That's fabulous. If I could boil that down in a nutshell and describe what client centric thinking is and putting the client first, that's it, Nick. Mm. So, throughout your career, Nick, what business development and marketing strategies, including things like key account management, have you employed successfully, which were the best ones?
So, as an individual, I love to be structured and disciplined about everything I do, and that might sound a bit odd for when I've been talking about collaboration, but nevertheless, structure and discipline is really important. So, I at the higher level, I like to start off with a strategy. I'm a big fan of the playing to win approach by Martin and Lafley, by setting out what it is that you want to achieve, where you're going to play, how you're going to win, and the capabilities you need. Means that you take a very structured approach, which once you've been able to write some of that down, you're able to communicate it to a team, and then they can get in behind it. So it's not a one-person operation. So that structure and discipline around strategy is really important. Once you've identified from that who you need to engage with, then you need a structured and disciplined approach around regular contact with them, understanding the individuals, what sort of insights might be worthwhile to them. And I think if I'm trying to get in front of a client to have a conversation, then there needs to be some value that I can add to that client. And it can't just be a cup of coffee and a donut, you know? It has to be something more. So that means I need to understand the client's environment and the sorts of challenges that they're facing, so that then I can maybe offer some insights. Now, by the end of the meeting, I may have received more back than I've given, which might be to my benefit, but also I'd like to think that would provoke some thinking on their part. And that's all part of the journey towards being that trusted advisor, that you can offer something that will provoke their thinking, so that then they want to come back and have another conversation with you, so that you can potentially help them identify problems as well as solving the ones that they're already aware of. So, in a nutshell, there's structure, discipline and focus that have served me well.
Awesome. So we've been focusing a lot on you and how it's working, but let's go to the organisational level now, and a bit in your current role and previous roles you've had in other large consulting firms. So at an organisational level, how do you actually get that client-centric thinking? So
as many were talking about today, how do you actually embed that CX and that client-centric culture within the organisation or firm?
Yes, fascinating challenge, that one. So you will hear lots of people talk about a top-down approach. So it has to come from the top. Everybody says that sort of thing. In my experience, we need, at the very highest levels of an organisation, we need to set out the expectations around client experience, and that could be through that strategy planning process that I've mentioned. But it's more than that, because if you get a cascade of intent that flows through, by the time it gets to some levels within the organisation, then it will have been diluted. So there needs to be that statement of intent from the very highest levels of leadership, but also there needs to be a grassroots approach. So if you think about retail, which is fundamentally different to consulting, but in retail, the people that you engage with in a retail environment have authority to make decisions over, and they may not have a lot of authority about many decisions, but they're the people you interact with. So if your core people are not well versed in client experience and understand the importance of that, then they're not going to deliver an experience. So first of all, I think it's about understanding how you can affect cultural change and how people respond to that. And top down is not the approach. It's part of the approach. So having the intent in place is really important. And then I think you need to talk to folks about the impact of the experience they deliver. And I've done that in the past through talking to individuals about the experience that they've received from organisations and also the experience that they think they are delivering to a client. And lots of folks, especially some of those junior graduate level folks, haven't really thought about that. So getting them to think about what good experience might look like or feel like for them, then they can start to think, well, when I send a report out and it's just received, is there a way that I can make that experience better for a client? Could I go along and see the client and do a talk through of the key points? Could I just phone them? Is there something else that I could do to make the experience better? So there's a framework that can be used. There's many frameworks, and one of those is the 5 E's that you'll find on Google. And so we tend to use the 5 E's. And we've got some fun training exercises that we run with people of all levels within the organisation to help them understand what experience is and how they can apply those 5 E's. And it's really important because the fifth of the 5 E's is the extend. And so once you've had a meeting with the client or whatever the interaction is, how do you then follow up and extend from there? And that's always been a challenge for lots of folks when they talk to clients is, what do I do next? So having a framework is really important. And then leadership at all levels comes into play to make sure that you're implementing what you said you would implement and you don't filter it on the way through. So we need champions and advocates and folks who are well naturally inclined to follow the frameworks and think about the experience to lead the way. So then that becomes more of a grassroots movement as opposed to a top-down approach. So that's the way I'd like to treat it.
So you're kind of looking at the mindset first of all, and get people to understand it, and then you're kind of embedding it and then following through with some simple tools or simple structure that people can then following it in their head. But the first thing is to understand what it is.
So I think that's right, but you've also got to make a commitment to it.
Yeah.
Lots of firms talk about being client-centric, but they do no more than talk about being client-centric. Yes. So you have to establish what it is that you want, and then start with the end in mind. What does it actually look like when you've got great client experiences being delivered? And lots of firms try to systematise processes, etc. But in my view, there's got to be a few minimum standards that you have to meet for CX, client experience. But then on top of that, you've got to allow people to innovate and use their imagination. And so in one particular organisation, I saw a safe design meeting, which is quite a dry process to go through to make sure design can be constructed and operated safely. And that was approached using some 5 E's, and it made it the most fun safe design meeting ever. And there was some memories created for everybody involved, which they keep with them even today. So it can be applied at all levels by all people through their own imagination.
Absolutely.
So as our audience knows, we always like to finish with the same question to everyone. So Nick, you're no different in this one. What are your top 3 tips for doing BD?
So I think first one is around being structured and disciplined. It is in itself a business activity and shouldn't be a secondary activity. So structured, disciplined, focused, and follow through on what you said you would do. I think the second thing really would be around being professionally inquisitive. When you get an opportunity to engage with a client, always take that opportunity to understand their business, but don't be afraid to offer insights. So you don't offer solutions, but you offer insights from other industries that may be able to inform their thinking and provoke their thinking. And the last thing is around think deliberately about engendering trust. Be credible, build your reliability, and make it all about the client. And I think those 3 are my top 3 tips for the day, Ben.
They're absolutely awesome, and if anyone can follow those, and they should be able to follow them, they're pretty simple, they'll have a great career and build great client relationships. So that's absolutely fabulous, Nick. Thank you so much for your time today. I'm sure everyone in the audience would have had great insights there. We've covered a great deal in the world of BD and marketing. Yes, we focus on the engineering sector, but all these skills are applicable to anyone who's in the consulting and across, whether they're lawyers, accountants, and of course engineers and architects. They will pick up on this and learn how to develop client relationships, but that discipline part is really, really focused, and that's one of the things that we focus here in the BD ladder. So I've really enjoyed today's conversations. Remember to like and subscribe to our channel, because that way you'll see more of these conversations. We have some other great guests lined up, and these business conversations really are your chance to hear from those within inside the industry on the key issues that are driving growth and forwarding the profession. So I look forward to seeing you next time.